Hello everyone and welcome to Global Outlook. I'm Mary Sitt. Today we'll learn how one man is working to make HCC's program for international students a world-class program, and later a compelling and beautifully crafted book of wartime savagery and hard choices. First, let's meet Dr. Nithy, and you say your whole name for us, please.
Nithy Sevanthinathan.
And you're originally from Malaysia, right?
That's right, Mary. Thank you.
Everyone goes by one name,
Yes.
so I'm just going to call you Nithy.
Perfectly fine. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, you're a director of HCC International Program. Tell me, why do so many students choose this program?
You know, Mary, HEC have a global brand, a global city. So we recently did a Facebook market test around the world. We received 111,000 hits.
Wow.
So we have a very beautiful brand name around the world. But the power to it, it's not just recruitment, it's the power of the local community believing in the dream of HEC, the affordability, smaller classroom, accessibility in their community. That's what attracted this many students. Right now, HEC is ranked #1 among all community colleges across the country with 6,000 over students from 143 different countries.
HCC has the #1 program for international students?
Yes,
That's
across
amazing.
the country among all community colleges. But I want to credit the community members. I hear this every time I travel around the world. So they choose. There's no community college can say, I'm the best like Stanford or Harvard.
Right.
So say, oh yeah, there's a community college near my house.
Right.
That's how the community college became blossomed. So the power of HEC service among the community is what attracted these many students. Based on data that I've reviewed, 85% of the students who choose a community college, there is something for them in the community. There's a family member, uncle, aunt, friends. Housing will become a natural relationship. And then the campuses that we have, my uncle lives about 5 minutes away from Central Campus. That's the attraction.
So there are links to the community itself, not just the college like a little island.
That's right. That's a very important thing. And I'm constantly trying to tell people around the country, do not make international an island.
Right.
Because remember, there are 3 reasons why an international student choose to come to the United States. 1, historically there is a poor infrastructure of higher education.
Okay.
Number 2, they want to improve themselves. And number 3, they want to improve themselves and the family so they can rise to the middle class.
Right.
That's the reason why there was a strong mobility from around the world. So till today, as of today, 2019, the United States is still the #1 destination for international students, the #1. But going forward, the key to the success is not just based on the destination, it's the service, it's the stewardship to the student. Remember, every single student who choose to go to pursue their higher education for one reason, to shape their own lives so that they can become better and become a better citizen of the society they belong to. Whether it's in the US or anywhere around the world, that's the goal.
So
nobody wants to get an education just for the education.
Right.
They want to improve and make better life
get a
for
better
themselves.
job. Right.
Correct.
So really it comes down to accessibility too. How accessible is this community college to me? How affordable is it? Can I get there?
Correct. And the affordability is, so you take the HEC tuition for international student. 1 year, almost 3 semesters, that's fall, summer and spring, is less than 5,000. Just the tuition. You can take the same
3 semesters, that's great.
Yes, and that's the same amount. You take it to University of Houston or any, it will be close to 12 to 17,000. So which one do you want to start with?
Right.
And that's the question I'm asking. The American families are also now thinking, the data shows in Texas alone, 62% of high school students from Texas are going to community college. So if American families are affirming the great education they can get, why not international families?
Right.
That's what I'm trying to challenge myself to create that pathway for them. You can come to HEC and go anywhere you want because our credits are accredited by the same accrediting agency that accredit every university.
Okay, so let me ask you this. How do you get over that stereotype of, oh, I don't want to go to a community college? My kid did this to me. I said, I think you should go to HCC. I'm not going there. I said, it's a really good school, et cetera, et cetera. How do you get over that? And it's still out there among certain, high schoolers.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How do you get over that stereotype of, oh, that's not really good? And, once they go, they go, wow, my professors are really good. Because she ended up going to HCC in the summer and got into UT Health Science Center.
There you go.
And it was from a base of HCC courses.
I call it, the community college called the unpolished gem.
Okay,
so
I like that.
the more you polish, the more you discover.
Uh-huh.
So we tell every student, especially parents who are here, go and check it out. Because especially kids, for them, they want instant gratification.
Yes.
So let's go check it out.
And they want a big name college.
Yes.
Yeah.
But remember, if they see other peers who are here with a similar background, oh my God, why you are here?
Right.
So remember, I can save my 2 years and I can dream bigger than what I can think. Oh, I can't get enrolled at UT Austin.
Right.
Fine. But UT Austin do take enrollment every year, am I right?
Right.
So you can now have an opportunity to build your credentials and your dream, and you shape your dream. Okay, here's where I want to go. Your faculty here knows you by your first name when you enter the classroom.
And that's a big plus.
So if you go to major universities, all are good, but you'll be in an auditorium. I think the faculty have to use a binoculars to see it, right? Because I came from that experience. So which one do you want? If I'm going to repeat my own personal journey, I will start my journey at a community college.
And then transfer to a 4-year.
Why not? Because the credits are almost the same, am I right?
And like you said, everything's transferable to Texas school, Texas college, right?
And Texas have some of the, so according to the national data published by IIE, the Open Door, 3 states attract the largest international student, and one of them is Texas. So there are great things are happening here. I constantly believe it's the stewardship, it's the servantship is what attracts our student. We can have buildings, we can have the classroom, but if we don't welcome them and don't say, hey, you can make a dream come true, not just walking with words, walking with actions. Here's your pathway. Here's who you can meet. Here's whom you can solve the problem. That's what they want to hear from us.
And is that the strategy you're using to boost the HCC program to make it even better than it is?
Absolutely.
To that world-class level?
Student, anywhere around the world, as a parent, will ask, what kind of service you're going to get for the money I invest?
That's true.
So think about it. The service is very important. I think even our chancellor keep reminding us every day, the ultimate student experience, not just through admission.
Right. So
it's
stewardship
the whole journey.
And servanthood, you said, to serve the students.
Absolutely.
And be
Remember,
available.
these students one day can go through this journey and tomorrow can be great world leaders, am I right?
Yes. Okay, you did something that was really fascinating. You did a biking expedition on 5 continents and made it an interactive learning experience, one of the first ones to do that. Tell me about that.
Mary, when I was growing up as a kid, I didn't know that I had so much energy. That's how it all came about. And I was looking to do something wild. So I always go to tall buildings and try to touch the sky. I know I can't reach it. And so along the journey, I started from a very poor working class family. At the age of 12, my parents couldn't afford to send me for more education. So I started to find a job and ended up working for a bicycle shop. That's how I learned how to, I never knew that journey will take me around the world. Never knew. So right after I finished high school, couldn't get into public universities, poor family. So I said, now what can I do to make a difference? So somehow something struck in my head that I can send a message. So in Malaysia at that time, drugs was very prevalent. So I said, don't be victimized by drugs. Let's explore the country. So I had a rickety bicycle with me. I have no idea how the bicycle looks like. It was heavy. Had my backpack, like about 35 kilos. I asked people, can you help me out? Sure, some people give me, oh, you're stupid, you're crazy. Who wants help? Who wants to do this? You know what? I smiled. I had the energy that drove me. So the first journey took me from my home, small town, all the way to Singapore. It became a national story. I never even knew it can become that strong.
And from there, you started doing cross-continent trips,
Then the newspaper keep asking me, what is next? Like, what is next? So I keep telling, after 4 expeditions, one of them was to raise money for a handicapped schools in Malaysia. They said, what is next? I thought I'm going to bike across the United States. They said, are you crazy? Do you know how big it is? I have no idea. So I came into the country in 1991. In 1992, I made the dream come true.
That's great. And you made it a learning experience and developed a curriculum for K to 12 based on your experience, right?
So I learned that, you know what, it's not just your journey, you share the journey. That's what sponsors ask. What can you do for the community? I said, I'll create a world-class, interactive global classroom. So I work with school teachers and they gave me the tools and we put it together. And that tool became so successful. So children can follow me 24/7 because the world don't sleep.
Right.
Half sleep, half awake.
Right.
So the world don't sleep. So they followed me along the journey, asked me questions. So I had a publisher donated books for the schools I visited across Africa. And then they had pen pal, so they can make friends with schools in Minnesota kids. That's how the exchange took place.
Now, will you do this for HCC?
Absolutely.
A bike expedition with HCC students?
Why not? Why not? Remember, we have 6,000 our students.
Right.
We already have a global city right here.
Right.
They can bring the exchange for us, and we can take. One of the other things I really want to accomplish is for HE students to go abroad.
Right.
What a great exchange. The more you discover the world, the more you discover yourself, no?
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing with
My
us.
pleasure.
Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Coming up next, Last Boat Out of Shanghai by Helen, a Chinese-American journalist who interviewed hundreds of exiles about their journey fleeing Mao's revolution. Stay with us.
HCC. So many reasons, so little tuition. Register today at hccs.edu/now.
I've seen people's lives change just by attending a class at HCC.
Some of them might not have the financial means to go to a four-year university. That doesn't make them any less quote-unquote smart than the kids who go to a four-year school.
HCC is easy to get to. It's easy to apply and easy to become a part of.
It gave me so much confidence.
Once you finish your 2 years there, you can transition into a four-year university or go into the workforce.
It's affordable, it's accessible, it changes lives.
HCC. So many classes, so little tuition. Register today at hccs.edu/now.
Shanghai has always been China's jewel, its richest, most modern and westernized city. It was home to sophisticated intellectuals, entrepreneurs, and a thriving middle class when Mao's revolution emerged victorious from the long civil war. Our next guest has written a book about this called Last Boat Out of Shanghai. Helen is a Fulbright scholar, a graduate of Princeton, and holds an honorary Doctor of Laws degree from the City University of New York. She's the author of numerous books, including Asian American Dreams, The Emergence of an American People. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, it's my honor to be here with you, Mary. Thank you.
And when I knew you way back, you were the editor of Ms. Magazine, too, right?
We were much younger journalists back in the day, yes.
You've had an accomplished career. I loved your book, Last Boat Out of Shanghai.
Thank you.
I will say I stayed up to 1 in the morning and 2 in the morning on numerous nights reading this before today. But it's just fascinating. Once you get started, you can't put it down, and that's usually not true of history books. Mm-hmm. So tell me about this. What prompted you to write a book about this?
Well, I had grown up hearing about this last boat out of Shanghai. My aunt and my mother, that's all I knew. We were on the last boat out of Shanghai, and it would always be with that air of mystery. And as a kid, you don't really know what that means. And as I got older, I met so many more people who had relatives from who had lived in Shanghai or been through Shanghai, and they were all on the last boat. And your uncle, I understand, might have been one. And so there was that feeling, well, okay, there's no boat big enough for all of these people. So what is that about? So that started my curiosity. You know, that what it was, that sense of urgency that you were on the last boat or the last plane, last train, that or what would have happened. And you know, this was at the advent of the Communist Revolution. Mm-hmm. What created that fear, that frenzy? So I began to look into it, and then my mother told me a story that just had a whole personal part to it.
And she didn't tell you till she was in her 70s, right?
Not until she was in her 70s. I knew nothing. I would ask my mom as a small child, "Mom, tell me something about life in China." Because in those days, people would say, "Go back where you came from."
Right.
And
right.
I would have to say, "Well, I'm from New Jersey and I'm here." You know, but China, I didn't know anything about. And she would just say, that was wartime, bad memory. And that would be it. She wouldn't want to say any more, and I thought there was nothing to say. Until one day I was in my 50s having dinner with my mom in her 70s, and I said, gee, Mom, too bad you can't tell me anything about your growing up in China. And then she said, all right, you want to know, I'll tell you. And out came secrets that she had held for 70 years about what that time, from the beginning of the invasion and attack, occupation by Japan, and life was miserable under this cruel and brutal, enemy, and somehow she ended up on the last boat out of Shanghai. And so that was when I began to think, there is so much more to this story, and I wanted to understand my mother's context more. So I started searching anywhere I could to find people who knew of somebody, had relatives, had some lead for me. All of those years as a journalist helped.
Yes.
And pretty much just put the word out. And over a period of 12 years, I interviewed more than 100 people, in addition to my mother, who had survived, been part of this exodus.
And did you interview them in English or Chinese or both?
For the most part, it was in English. I'm ABC, an American-born Chinese. I was monolingual as a child because my parents didn't want us to grow up with an accent.
Right.
That was their fear, that we would be, harmed by that, discriminated against. And so I didn't grow up, but Shanghai was such an international city. Everybody of any level of education spoke at least English, or many European languages, Russian, you name it. Those languages were spoken. There were newspapers, several in English, daily newspapers in Shanghai. So I didn't feel too hindered, by the fact that, of course I wished every day that my father had not said that to my mother, but I had a translator helping me, where I needed that, or to translate.
And you made multiple trips to Shanghai also?
I made multiple trips, and as a Fulbright scholar, I got to live in Shanghai for 6 months.
Wow.
And really used that time to do a lot of research.
So, you divide the book up into, you follow 4, I'm calling them characters, but they're actually really real people, including your own mother.
This is a nonfiction book.
Right.
Some people say it reads like a novel, which is a high compliment, but it's not a novel. It's all real people.
It's the real people, and each chapter is one person's story, and then you flip it, the next chapter is Ho's story, the next chapter is Bing's story. And there are 4 young people you follow from really young, age 6 on up to their 20s. How did you get that level of detail? I mean, I'm sitting there going, is this like fictionalized? It probably happened because it happened in those days, and so you just sort of like, it would have happened to the 6-year-old? Or are these things people really told you this happened to them? You know what I'm saying?
These are things that people really told me. I mean,
like
I would
the car jumping the curb and almost hitting, I think it was your mother. Was it your
Right,
mother?
right.
Yeah. Was that really happened?
I talked to the man who was driving the car.
Oh my goodness.
Who told me all about that.
Okay.
And so here's the thing. I interviewed more than 100 people. In that time, I wanted a variety, a real diversity of the people. People who were with the old regime, who were part of the losing side of the party, just the whole gamut. But 2 boys, 2 girls. Right. But I needed to find people with excellent memories and recollection, and not just good memories, but also could reflect on those.
And verifiable memories too, right?
And yes, I interviewed relatives. I had documents from them, letters, things like that, that I could use to back things up. Some of them would say, I asked, what did you say to your father when he was in prison? And they would tell me. Now, did they really say it exactly as that? I don't know, but it's what they told me.
Right.
And so that's what I went by. And this really is the only book in English. There's no PhD dissertation. There's no master's thesis about this exodus. It's a forgotten exodus, a forgotten time.
Helen, how many people escaped and left Shanghai? Do you have an estimate?
It was probably, if you count the people who went through Shanghai, more than 1 million. Millions maybe. The people who fled Shanghai, China overall was in the millions.
Okay.
But it was an exodus at a time of revolution. Nobody was counting.
Right.
And that was part of
records.
Well, that was part of my task when I was in Shanghai, to try to dig up as many records as I could.
Right.
And the closest I came was talking to one of the most famous sociologists and demographers of Shanghai. And he gave me some estimates. And short of that, it's all, how many people did Hong Kong increase by? 1 million in 1 year. It was less than 1 million. It doubled, more than doubled in size. More than 2 million people landed in Taiwan, you know, on top of the Taiwanese who were already there.
But you don't really know how many, could you figure out how many of those immigrants were from Shanghai itself?
So I don't know how many were, but many were. The people in Hong Kong who were already in Hong Kong said, oh, those Shanghainese. Now, they could have been from Beijing, but they called them all Shanghainese.
Right.
So there was enough of them that they were considered to be the dominant group. And same thing in Taiwan. The people came from all over, but there was a very clear population from Shanghai.
Why do you think no one has written this story yet, until you? Which is wonderful for you, but it's just like no one's talked about it much, right?
Partly because when I spoke to people from Hong Kong, and I said, you know, and so I spent time in Hong Kong too, trying to find people, and they would say, well, that's such a common story. There were so many people from Shanghai.
So no big deal.
Well, no big deal. Why are you writing about this? And I think, you know, even today, 70 years later, many of them think, well, what's the big deal? You know, is this history? And in fact, it is history.
It is.
This is a generation that was a World War II generation. They are, time is not on their side.
We're going to take a little break right now, but we'll be right back with more from Helen Zia. She'll tell us about these 4 real people in her book and what happened to them. Don't go away.
HCC. So many locations. So little tuition. Register today at hccs.edu/now.
We have academic programs that help students get from high school into a university. And the data is very clear that students that take the path of a community college finish in far higher numbers than students that start straight into a university experience. Our students can achieve a baccalaureate degree in multiple fields from the universities in the area without ever leaving Houston Community College.
HCC's online college is officially open. This not only means online classes, but also online degrees and certificates. You can now credential up anytime, anywhere. Join the fast-growing number of students getting their full college education from anywhere they use a laptop. HCC currently offers 32 fully online degrees and will offer 71 next year. You no longer have to find a way or time to get to college. HCC brings college to you.
We've been talking with Helen Zia, author of Last Boat Out of Shanghai, the epic story of the Chinese who fled Mao's revolution. Helen, I couldn't put this book down. I loved it. You have, each chapter tells one story of one person, and then you go to the next person and the next. Tell me how you got that, how you decided to do it that way, that structure.
Well, I have to say one of the reasons this book took 12 years is that it's a very complicated story. It's during the most tumultuous time in the 20th century and the story of modern China. And I wanted to tell it through 4 people, you know, so that we could connect to them. And so I tried a lot of different structures. And, you know, it could have been that I took 4 people and just took them each, you know, sequentially, but then it would be repeating the different events, which were historic things. You know, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, there was also the bombing of Shanghai the same day. And so that felt repetitious. So then we just, you know, thought that the best way would be to take bits and pieces and tell the story in a chronology and follow them that way. And I hope it was had enough continuity to feel like you didn't forget what happened to the last one by the time you got back to them again.
I learned so much history, but not in that boring history book way, just through the personal stories of these 4 people who told, and I learned, you know, I was taught certain ththings about Chiang Kai-shek and what, you know, and then the good guys, the bad guys, and then in this book I was going, oh, wow, I didn't know he did all that. So it really opened up my eyes of the different, and I like the way you told it. It's a very spare tone, very journalism-like. You didn't sit there and do this flowery stuff. No, it's just like stating the facts, but in a very compelling way through the stories of these 4 people.
Well, that's the thing about it. This is not a novel, and I actually had one reviewer said, "Oh, it's a novel. It's really not such a good novel." And it's like, no, it's not a novel.
No, yeah.
These are real people's lives, and so I couldn't embellish them.
Right.
You know, so I really had to tell it as this is what happened to them, and this is what they told me.
So, you know, finding out about your own mother's story, which is really your story. Tell me how that changed you and how that affected you.
Well, this was learning these secrets that my mother had had all her life, and you know, she had waited 70 years before even telling them, and it just changed my world. I mean, in the sense that as a kid growing up, each of us grow up with a family mythology, the things that our parents want us to know, the things that our parents think will make us better and stronger people. And so often they don't tell us the grim details of things that are maybe not so happy to share. And for some people, those memories are so painful that they don't, and they may carry them to their deaths. And as adults, we don't even know these things about our family stories. And so my mother gave me a gift by telling me these things that made me see her in a whole different way. I mean, I knew my mother was a strong woman. She was an incredibly gentle woman, but you know, resilient. This made me understand where that came from, that inside that gentle woman was a really core of steel to have survived the things that she did.
I mean, when she was 6 years old, she was taken by her father, whom she adored and loved, on a special train trip. She thought she was going on a special little expedition. Instead, he basically gave her away to someone else to adopt her, right?
Right. Well,
or did he
do who knows what. I mean, I asked my mother, did he sell you? And my mother said, no. And I think she was a child. I think she really doesn't know exactly what transaction happened. And there was a transaction of some sort. But she was fortunate. She was adopted by somebody who wanted to give her a home. Of course, that unraveled too because of the war and all the turmoil in China. But she managed to somehow navigate that pain. And everywhere she saw a man about the size of her father, she looked and thought, it's Baba, it's my father. And then only then as a child to have that disappointment. And she carried that all through her life, I have to say. Those pains and traumas never go away, which is something that I also hope will be learned from this book, is as these refugee crises happen all through the world today, people like my mother, it's happening every day to children who are taken away from their parents, put in cages, not being allowed to be hugged. And these are traumas that are going to be with them all their lives. And why not learn from history instead of repeating it?
And the refugees you talk about in this book were so resilient. It seems like you said the first generation, their children wanted to sort of give back, or they trained their children and you know, pushed them to do that. And they're very successful. I mean, can you name some of the people that we probably would be familiar with?
Out of this diaspora, you know, the exodus out of China was China's loss and everywhere else's gain. And in the United States, we're talking about Amy Tan, Elaine Chao, who's Secretary of Transportation today, Stephen Chu, who was a Nobel Prize winner, and 2 other Nobel Prize winners, but he was the Secretary of Energy under President Obama. We're talking about Maya Lin, David Henry Huang, noted people of every profession.
And their parents were refugees from Shanghai.
And their parents were part of this diaspora. But part of the thing to note, it's not so much, I think, that they were from Shanghai, but that they were the children of refugees and migrants, immigrants. Because as we debate immigration today, we're talking about Colin Powell and Edwidge Dandiket and Carlos Santana, and the list. So you don't have to be Chinese to be one of these achieving children. It's really the children of immigrants who have seen their parents suffer and sacrifice, that these are the people who know that all of what they have came at a great struggle. And so the generation that follows are the achievers.
Helen, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Read the book, Last Boat Out of Shanghai. That's all for this edition of Global Outlook. Join us every Friday and Saturday at 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m., plus Saturday at 10 a.m. I'm Mary Sitt. Thanks for watching.